Honoured guests and colleagues, hello from the UK. It's a huge privilege for me to be speaking to you at the beginning of this inclusive sport conference. I've spent over 40 years of my life working in this important area of sport, and opportunities like this are essential, bringing colleagues together to share ideas. I'd like to thank the team at Sport Singapore for inviting me to participate and also for organising the event. And it's also great for me on a personal level to be working with Sport Singapore again. Some years ago, I was lucky to run a number of workshops in Singapore on behalf of the Singapore Disability Sport Council. I think over about 3 years. And so it's really great to be able to make that connection again. From the outset, I want to say that I'm speaking to you as a practitioner. I call this session Taking a Step Towards Inclusion. And I want to use the short time that we have available to share some easy to apply practical ideas that you can take away and use. So let's look at the format of the session. We're going to take a brief look at the STEP adaptation tool. And it's a simple, practical method that you can apply to any activity. In order to demonstrate STEP, I'm using mostly at-home activities. And I think this is particularly pertinent in this current COVID climate. But also because young people spend a lot of time in the evenings, at weekends, at home. And they could be more active during those periods. The important thing is that the ideas that I'm going to share are strategies that you can take away and use immediately, tomorrow, or even better, later today. So let's look at the STEP adaptation tool. It's made up of 4 elements, beginning with space. Space could refer to the playing area, distances to targets, or ways in which the space can be modified. The next part of the STEP adaptation tool is the task. That's the way that young people perform the activity, the different ways in which they can do it, and the ways that skills can be broken down into different components. The third element in STEP is equipment, and this can refer to the way that equipment can be modified and adapted. Regular equipment can be changed, or adaptations based on improvisation. And finally, people. This refers really to the way in which participants interact with each other. You can match abilities, you can play around with the team numbers, and always adhering to individual needs. So let's start with space. How we can get the most from the space that's available. Activities and games can be played in any available space. So for example, this improvised bocce game being played in an outdoor patio area. But we can play the same game in an indoor area, such as this narrow hallway, and adjust the activity in order to suit the space we have. We can also subdivide a space. So using tape and some paper numbers, we can allocate scores to a target grid. And then we can do something very similar in our indoor space. We can divide the area up into zones, allocate scores, and then use this area for all kinds of target-based activities. We can think about using different kinds of surface. So for example, a grassy area creates some friction and stops a ball from rolling too far. Or we can think about using a smooth tabletop and create an improvised 10-pin bowling game. Or we can play a similar kind of game on any smooth floor surface, like a kitchen floor. The indoor and outdoor environment can be used to create interesting challenges. So in this case, we can make a string trail just using what we can find in the garden. We can make it more challenging by adding some obstacles, and we can also hang some treats around the course to act as an incentive to keep going. To make the course more visible, we can attach some small paper flags. Or as an additional challenge, we can try the string trail whilst wearing eye shades. In target games, we can adjust the distance. If we're successful, we can move further away. If we miss, we can go a bit closer. People don't always need to throw towards the target from the same distance. We can have different distances from a target for people who have different abilities. And lastly, under space, let's consider a familiar playing area, like this basketball court. If we divide the court longitudinally, we can create 3 zones. The central zone can be occupied by players who might have mobility impairments, such as wheelchair users or those using sticks or frames. The outer zones can be occupied by players who are ambulant, able to walk or run. The players remain in their zones, but they are all playing together in the same team. So let's summarize space. Space can be manipulated in many ways. For example, this playing area itself, distance to a target, or the gaps between players, between participants. So one example might be if we want to create more interaction between a group of participants or just between 2 people, then we can make the space smaller. This increases interaction. If, on the other hand, we want to emphasize movement and mobility, then we can make the space larger. And that encourages young people to move more. We can also make use of the indoor and outdoor environment to create new challenges. So use what you have immediately available to you and use your imagination to try and make those activities interesting and challenging to young people. And where space is limited, then modify the rules of the activity and the way that people interact, the way that people play. So activities which perhaps need a lot of space, you can modify these, the way that people play, by if you have to make the space smaller, if you have to play in a smaller area, just change the rules to suit the space you have. So let's consider task, which is essentially different ways of doing the same thing. So in this simple throwing activity, we can throw using an underarm toss. We can roll the ball along the floor, or we can propel it forward using our foot. We can use the hand we normally favour, or as a challenge, we can use our non-dominant or least preferred hand. It's important that tasks are performed progressively. This is a simple table tennis progression. First by simply rolling the ball, then beginning to use the hand to direct, control and strike the ball. This begins to move the game towards something resembling table tennis. The next stage is to introduce bats or a similar striking implement. Still keeping the ball travelling along the table surface, but beginning to explore skills such as backhand and forehand. Introduce a barrier, which means the players have to start to adjust the trajectory of the ball. For some players, striking a moving ball might be challenging. So instead they can use a small tee and strike the ball when they're ready. As the player's skill and confidence improves, they can start to move towards striking a ball dropped by a teammate. To further improve control and coordination, we can introduce some small targets. These act as an incentive, encouraging the players to strike the ball in a given direction. Again, at this stage, the player is striking a static ball. In this final part of the progression, the player tries to hit the target as indicated by the coach. So let's look back at task. There's more than one way to do any activity, any skill. So utilize the specific abilities of every individual. Try to start with the part of an activity that a young person can do and grow the activity from there. Develop their skills from the part of the activity that they can do. So that's your start point. Also challenge young people to perform the tasks in the best way that they can. It's not only about successful completion of a task, but also about the quality of the technique, the skill that's involved, and the performance, the outcome. It's about the quality of in which the young person performs the task that's important. Always look for ways of challenging and maximizing every young person's potential. And then, as we've seen, task progressions can be very effective in developing skills, enabling people to move from one level to another. However, it's very important that a young person is proficient in a specific task before you move them on to the next level. So let's look next at ways of using and adapting equipment, especially in the home environment. With some tape and 2 sheets of newspaper, it's very easy to fashion paper balls. These can be made different sizes to suit the individual or the activity. And you can use paper balls to play a host of target-based games. Most people are familiar with the Paralympic sport of bocce, but we don't often have access to the equipment at home. But with some cheap poster paint, we can soon transform a bunch of paper balls into a bocce set. It's fun for young people to help make the equipment themselves, and then they can be used to play the great game of bocce. Some young people benefit from the use of sound or bell balls. But you can transform any ball into a sound ball by placing it in a plastic bag and securing with tape. The ball crackles when it rolls on the ground. With some plastic jars and lids, you can make a great tabletop target game. To help with propelling the ball, a young person can use a plastic ruler, or an oven mitt can be used, particularly by young people who may have impaired or absent grip. If we transfer the target game to the floor, a sweeping brush makes a great way of pushing the jar lid towards the target. Use your imagination. You can utilize all kinds of household equipment to make an adapted game. Involve young people and encourage them to invent their own games. So let's recap equipment. Use the equipment available to you as imaginatively and creatively as you can. It's not always necessary to use a piece of equipment for the purpose for which it was designed. You can use it to help you create some other kind of a challenge. Also, non-sports equipment items can be incorporated into physical activity. So we've seen already things like empty plastic water bottles, jar lids, newspaper. You can use all of these items in order to help you create and support young people in physical activity. And finally, utilize play and recreational equipment. This might be equipment that is really just designed to develop fun opportunities. But you can use that as an early stage in the development of skills in young people. When we talk about people, what we're thinking about is really how the participants interact. Of course, young people can compete against another person, or alternatively, they just try to beat their own best score. Like this. But another important aspect is to encourage young people to work together to help each other improve their performance, or to play games which help to develop communication skills or to establish trust. Games like this can help young people to develop their own communication systems, in this case based on touch. So let's look back at people. Encourage young people to support and assist one another. This may be siblings, other family members. So encourage young people not only to succeed, but also to help other people to also succeed and to get the most out of each other within any given activity. Emphasize teamwork through the use of non-competitive, cooperative activities. It's not always about competitive activities, about someone winning and someone losing. It's also about creating teamwork and working collaboratively in order to achieve an outcome. Provide opportunities for young people to develop their leadership skills. So even if it's just a simple thing like enabling a young person to run an activity. So they are in charge of the activity and they decide the rules, they decide how the game will progress. Give people opportunity to lead and develop those skills where they can take responsibility for other people. Step: space, task, equipment, people. So to conclude this brief session, let's summarize the STEP adaptation tool. STEP is an easy to apply adaptation tool. That's what it's for. It was designed and conceived to support practice and practical application. You can use it to support inclusion across any activity and with any ability. So it's there to be flexible and to be used in two ways really: to support young people that need extra assistance in order to develop their skills and abilities, but also to challenge young people who at the other end of the scale may be needing to be pushed and encouraged and challenged. So you can make adjustments to the STEP components in order to support, but also to challenge. You can also use the STEP components individually. So you may focus on one specific aspect, for example, task, the way that the young people are doing the activity. You may look at ways of making changes there in order to provide support, or in order to encourage them to try something different. But you can also use the STEP components in combination. So you can use two or more of the STEP components together in order to make an activity more inclusive. So thanks for your attention in this very short session, this time that we've had together. I hope that you can immediately think of ways in which you could apply the STEP adaptation tool to your own settings and to the young people with whom you are working. Don't forget to check out the Inclusion Club. There's lots of resources there and information, most of it video based on inclusive physical activity, but also issues around inclusion that you might find interesting. And there are also resources that you can download. It's free to subscribe. So please visit www.theinclusionclub.com. I think now we have time for some questions.